My name is Alara Vance. I'm 21 years old, and the day I learned I'd been accepted to Crestwood University, my parents bought my brother a car. It was a vintage sapphire blue convertible, polished to a mirror shine, with a ridiculously large silver bow tied to the steering wheel. My acceptance letter, the culmination of 4 years of sleepless nights and relentless focus, was met with a quiet nod. They said I was the resilient one, the one who didn't require their support, so they poured all their resources, their hopes, and their applause into the son who did. But what they failed to understand was that while they were busy nurturing his potential, I was quietly planting a forest that would one day tower over their manicured garden. If you've ever been asked to be the strong one, only to find it made you easier to ignore, then this story is for you. It's a quiet story, but I've found the quietest things often have the most to say. The letter lay on the polished oak of our entryway table, a creamy, heavyweight envelope embossed with the Crestwood University seal. I had left it there deliberately, a silent announcement. I'd been holding it in my hands for nearly an hour, feeling the raised lettering under my fingertips, the weight of a future I had built for myself, line by painstaking line. The afternoon sun slanted through the beveled glass of the front door, casting a rainbow on the wall. It felt like a good omen. Then I heard the sound, the low, throaty rumble of an engine, unlike our family's sensible sedan. I watched through the window as the sapphire blue convertible rolled into the driveway. It gleamed under the sun, a slash of impossible color against the muted greens and grays of our suburban street. The silver bow, ostentatious and bright, caught the light and threw it back in dazzling sparks. The timing wasn't merely coincidental, it felt orchestrated by a universe, with a particularly sharp sense of irony. "Leo, darling. Come and see," my mother's voice trilled from the porch, pitched with a theatrical excitement she reserved exclusively for my younger brother. Leo, ever the star of his own show, bounded out of the house, his laughter preceding him. He was all charm and easy smiles, a boy who moved through the world with the unshakable confidence of someone who had never been told no. He skidded to a halt on the driveway, his mouth falling open in a perfect caricature of surprise. My father was right behind him, clapping a hand on Leo's shoulder. "State championship for the debate team, straight B's, and you've been so present this year, son. You earned this." I stood in the cool dimness of the hallway, the Crestwood letter feeling suddenly flimsy in my hand. No one had noticed it. No one had noticed me. A 4.4 GPA, captain of the academic decathlon team, a full tuition scholarship to the most prestigious university in the state. I did the laundry without being asked. I edited my mother's newsletters for her garden club. I once spent an entire weekend helping Leo cram for a history final he was about to fail, patiently explaining the causes of the Peloponnesian War until my voice was hoarse. But yes, Leo was present. Later that evening, the letter was still on the table. During dinner, I finally nudged it forward. "I got in," I said, my voice sounding small in the cavernous dining room. My mother glanced at it, her fork halfway to her mouth. She offered a thin, pleasant smile. "Oh, that's wonderful, dear. We knew you would." That was it. No hug. No questions about the program I'd applied to. No shared thrill of victory. Just that placid, dismissive approval she gave to things that were expected, things that didn't require any emotional investment. The next morning, the house was a flurry of activity for Leo's impromptu celebration. His friends from the debate team filled our living room, leaving scuff marks on the hardwood floors my mother usually protected with an almost religious fervor. There were no balloons for me, only a single, generic greeting card left on the kitchen counter. Inside, in my father's blocky, impersonal script, were 2 words, "We're proud." It wasn't signed. I stared at the card for a long time, turning it over in my hands. The ink felt cold. I almost laughed, a hollow, bitter sound, but it caught in my throat. On Friday, my grandmother, Genevieve, came to visit. We called her Gigi. She moved with the careful, deliberate slowness of her 83 years, her hands gnarled with arthritis, but her eyes, the same deep cobalt as my own, were as sharp and perceptive as ever. She bypassed my parents in the living room with a polite nod and came straight to me in the kitchen, her papery soft cheek cool against mine as she kissed me. "I saw the car," she said, her voice a low murmur. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact. She took her usual seat in the worn armchair by the bay window, a spot that caught the morning light. We sat in comfortable silence for a long time, watching the sunlight play across the meticulously tended hydrangeas in the backyard. Leo's car sat in the driveway like a sleeping jewel, a constant, gleaming reminder. After a while, Gigi reached into her oversized, cluttered handbag and pulled out two things, a cloth-bound journal the color of a midnight sky, and a simple, unadorned white envelope. She placed them in my lap. Her hand rested on mine for a moment, her touch surprisingly firm. "Open this later, when you're by yourself," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "And Alara, promise me you'll write in this. Write down the things no one else is willing to hear." Her gaze was unwavering. That evening, long after the house had fallen silent, after the distant hum of the dishwasher had faded and the weight of the day had settled in my bones, I sat on the edge of my bed and opened the envelope. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, were stacks of crisp $100 bills. I counted them twice. $15,000. My breath hitched. There was no card, no note of explanation. Just the money and the deep indigo journal, its blank pages smelling faintly of lavender and old paper, a scent that was uniquely Gigi. I didn't cry. The time for tears felt long past. Instead, I opened the journal to the first page. The paper was thick and smooth under my pen. In careful, steady script, I wrote. They said I was resilient, so they decided I didn't need water. They didn't realize I was learning to grow in the desert. They would not see the tide coming in until their castles were already underwater. The light from my desk lamp cast a weak, yellow circle on the stack of textbooks and scattered notes. On the other side of our dorm room, my roommate, Maya, was fast asleep, her breathing soft and even. Her side of the room was a curated landscape of soft throws, framed photos, and a string of fairy lights that cast a warm, gentle glow. My side was a fortress of academic necessity. I blinked, trying to force my eyes to focus on the intricate diagrams of cellular mitosis. The lines blurred, swam, then doubled. My head felt heavy, and I let it droop for just a second, resting my forehead on the cool surface of the book. "Just 5 more minutes," I murmured to the empty room. Gigi's words often came back to me in these quiet, exhausted moments. "Being strong doesn't mean you have to be a mule, my love. Don't let them load you up until your back breaks." But the reality of my situation was far simpler. If I didn't carry the load, it would be dropped, and I would be buried beneath it. At Crestwood, I was anonymous. I wasn't a legacy student, nor was I a charismatic socialite. I was just the quiet girl in the back of the lecture hall, the one with perpetually ink-stained fingers and a schedule timed to the minute. My days were a relentless cycle: wake at 5, an early shift shelving books at the library, back-to-back lectures, a quick lunch of an apple and a protein bar eaten on the walk across the quad, and then the evening rush at the Gilded Bean, the campus coffee shop. There, I frothed milk, wiped down sticky counters, and smiled at entitled students ordering complicated drinks, all while my feet ached and my mind raced with the formulas and theories I needed to memorize. Meanwhile, Leo's Instagram feed was a curated tour of his gap year in Southeast Asia. Sun-drenched beaches in Thailand, ancient temples in Cambodia, bustling markets in Vietnam. The captions were always something breezy and philosophical, like "finding my truth" or "collect moments, not things." I stopped looking after he posted a photo of himself on a luxury yacht, a glass of champagne in hand, with the caption, "Hard work pays off." Maya noticed my monastic existence. She was kind about it, never pressing, but her observant eyes missed little. She'd see me stumble in late at night, smelling of burnt coffee and disinfectant, and simply leave a bottle of water on my nightstand. One Tuesday, after a particularly brutal double shift followed by a late-night study session, I came back to the room, dropped my backpack by the door, and fell asleep with my face pressed against my open textbook on my desk. I don't know how long I was out, but I woke to the feeling of a cool, damp cloth on the back of my neck. Maya was crouched beside me, her expression a mixture of concern and genuine curiosity. "You're going to run yourself into the ground, Alara," she said softly. Her voice was gentle, free of judgment. "You know there are, like, student loans and stuff, right? You don't have to do all this alone." I blinked up at her, my mind thick with sleep. The words felt lodged in my throat, heavy and old. "It's how it's always been," I finally managed to say. "If I want something, I have to be the one to build it." Maya held my gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. She didn't offer any more advice. She simply squeezed my shoulder, turned off my harsh desk lamp, and padded back to her own bed, leaving me in the soft glow of her fairy lights. The following Thursday was the midterm presentation for our advanced biology seminar. I had poured every spare moment into it, creating a detailed 3D, animated model of the molecular cascade that leads to plaque formation in neurodegenerative diseases. It was a topic most undergraduates wouldn't touch until their final year, if at all. While my classmates fumbled with note cards and stammered through their PowerPoint slides, I walked to the front of the room and spoke from memory. My voice was low but steady as I guided the class through the complex, elegant dance of proteins and receptors. The usual classroom chatter died down, replaced by a focused silence. Dr. Eris Thorne, the department head and a notoriously exacting professor, watched from the back of the room. He didn't smile or nod, he simply observed, his expression unreadable, occasionally jotting something down in a small, black notebook. When I finished and returned to my seat, Cassandra Thorne, the professor's impeccably dressed and perpetually condescending niece, leaned over. "Quite the performance," she whispered, a saccharine smile playing on her lips. "Trying to impress old Uncle Eris? I hear the Hardship Scholarship Fund is extra competitive this year." I didn't reply. Her words were meant to sting, to reduce my work to a desperate plea for financial aid. But the truth was, I had already submitted that application a week ago. Her family's name was on a plaque in the science building's lobby. Mine was on a waiting list for student housing. The gap between our worlds was too vast for her taunts to even cross. After the class filed out, I stayed behind to pack my bag, bracing myself for the walk to the Gilded Bean. Dr. Thorne approached my desk, his footsteps quiet on the linoleum floor. "Your conceptual framework is maybe 3 years ahead of your peers, Ms. Vance," he said, his voice a dry, precise baritone. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. "Have you ever considered applying for a position in a research lab?" I looked up, my heart giving a sudden, sharp jolt. I was so used to being invisible that direct acknowledgement felt like a spotlight. My mouth felt dry. He didn't wait for an answer. He placed a simple, white business card on my desk. "My lab. Friday morning, 8 o'clock. Don't be late." The door clicked shut behind him. I stared at the card, at the clean, black fonts spelling out his name and title. Then I looked down at my own hands. The knuckles were red and chapped from the hot water and cleaning solutions at the coffee shop. A small, faint scar from a burn marked my wrist. "Yes," I whispered to the empty room. Every single day. The day I first set foot in Dr. Thorne's laboratory, an email from my mother arrived. There was no gentle phone call, no soft prelude. The subject line was stark and clinical, Gigi's funeral. The body of the message was just 4 lines, detailing the date, time, and location. There were no words of comfort, no shared expression of grief, not even a simple love, Mom. I read it standing beside a rack of humming machinery, the sterile, chemical scent of the lab filling my lungs. I read it once, twice, then pressed delete. Gigi was gone. Just like that. The vial I was holding slipped from my gloved fingers and shattered on the pristine white floor, the sound sharp and violent in the cathedral-like silence of the lab. A few of the other student researchers glanced over, their faces blank masks of mild annoyance, before turning back to their own work. No one asked if I was okay. Dr. Thorne, hunched over a microscope in the corner, didn't even look up. His lab was a place of intense, monastic focus. On that day, its sterile quiet felt less like a sanctuary and more like a tomb. I cleaned up the broken glass, my movements stiff and robotic, and worked until the sun went down, and then I kept working. The funeral was held in a small, windswept cemetery in my hometown, a place I hadn't visited in years. I wore a simple black dress I'd found at a thrift store and a coat Maya had insisted I borrow. The sky was a heavy, oppressive gray, the color of wet stone, and a fine mist hung in the air, clinging to my hair and clothes. I stood near a large oak tree at the edge of the mourners, feeling like a ghost at my own family's gathering. My parents stood by the graveside, my mother leaning heavily on my father's arm. Leo was beside them, his shoulders slumped, his usual easy charm erased by a somber expression. They were a tight, closed unit of grief, a circle I was not invited to enter. No one looked my way. No one waved me over. When the minister began to speak, his words were snatched away by the wind. I couldn't hear them anyway. My ears were filled with the roaring silence, the sound of a final door clicking shut. I stared at the polished granite of the headstone, Genevieve Vance. 1940 to 2023. Beloved mother and grandmother. There was no mention of the stories she told, the way she taught me to bake bread, or the $15,000 she had given me with a conspiratorial wink. Just 2 dates carved in stone. When the service concluded, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I knew no one would follow. The next morning, I was the first person to arrive at the lab. I unlocked the door before the sun was fully up, the sky outside still a bruised purple. I didn't speak to anyone when they started to trickle in. I didn't take a break for lunch. I worked. My project, once a theoretical exercise, became my entire world. The goal was to develop a biosensor that could detect the specific protein misfoldings associated with early-stage neurodegenerative diseases, catching them years, maybe even a decade, before clinical symptoms appeared. It was an audacious, almost impossible idea, but it was mine now. It was Gigi's legacy. I ran simulations until the numbers blurred. I calibrated instruments until my fingers were numb. I forgot to eat. I forgot to sleep. That night, exhausted and hollowed out, I curled up on the small, worn-out couch in the lab's break room, the rhythmic hum of the centrifuges a strange and lonely lullaby. I dreamed of Gigi's voice, warm and clear, telling me a story about a seed that grew in the dark. When I awoke, a thick, wool lab coat had been draped over me. It wasn't mine. It smelled faintly of old books and bergamot tea. A small, folded note was tucked into the pocket. I pulled it out. The handwriting was sharp, precise, and instantly recognizable. Dr. Thorne's. Grief is a crucible. Don't let it burn you. Let it forge you. I didn't cry. Not then. The tears were frozen somewhere deep inside me. Instead, I reached into my backpack and pulled out the indigo journal Gigi had given me. I flipped to a fresh page, the paper cool beneath my hand. I wrote only 4 words. They will watch me rise. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a small, fierce smile touched my lips. The first time my parents asked if I was still in school, my research had just been instrumental in securing a preliminary diagnosis for a patient in our first clinical trial. That same morning, Leo had posted a photo on his new lifestyle blog. It was a picture of him, artfully disheveled, sipping an espresso at a Parisian cafe. The caption read, "The artist's journey is one of radical self-creation." My phone buzzed with a notification from the family group chat. My aunt had shared a photo of a new puppy. My mother replied with a string of heart emojis. My father sent a thumbs up. No one asked how I was, what I was doing, or whether the scholarship I was on was enough to cover my rent. They never did. Which was fine. I had long since stopped waiting by the phone. Dr. Thorne's research wing was my new universe. It smelled of ozone, sterilized metal, and the faint, sharp scent of citrus from the cleaning solutions. The glass walls of the offices were covered in a chaotic tapestry of whiteboard marker, complex equations, molecular diagrams, and half-formed ideas. My name wasn't on any of the office doors. Not yet. Dr. Thorne walked past my station, pausing to peer at the data scrolling across my monitor. "The protein aggregation markers are consistent," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "The signal-to-noise ratio is clean." I nodded, my eyes fixed on the screen. It was the 5th successful test in a row. Our biosensor, a tiny chip that analyzed trace biomarkers in saliva, was not only working, it was working with an unprecedented 96.8% accuracy. He said nothing more, just gave my shoulder a brief, firm squeeze before moving on. That squeeze, in the quiet, sterile language of the lab, was a roar of approval. It had taken 2.5 years of false starts, funding scares, and more instant ramen than any human should consume. But now it was real. The patient, a man in his early 50s, had been flagged by our sensor during a voluntary screening. Traditional methods showed nothing, but our technology detected the faint, insidious signature of a disease that wouldn't have shown symptoms for another 5 to 7 years. A follow-up with a specialist confirmed it: early-onset Alzheimer's, caught at stage 0. He was now a candidate for emerging preventative therapies that could slow the disease's progression to a crawl. A heavy silence fell over the lab as the confirmation email was read aloud. It wasn't the pop of a champagne cork. It was the quiet, profound awe of people who had just witnessed a small miracle. Dr. Peterson, a senior researcher who had once patronizingly called my initial proposal a bit fanciful, read the report 3 times, then looked at me over the top of his glasses and said, simply, "Proceed, Ms. Vance. Full steam ahead." Within a week, Origen Biosystems, a venture capital firm specializing in disruptive medical technologies, had requested a formal proposal. When Dr. Thorne handed me the initial paperwork, the corner of his mouth twitched in what, for him, was a dazzling smile. "This is your moment, Alara. They want to fund the commercial development. They want to build a company around this technology." I read through the non-disclosure agreement, my heart beating a steady, powerful rhythm. I pointed to a single clause regarding public relations. "I want all publications and press releases to list the lead researcher as anonymous until after my graduation." Dr. Thorne raised a curious eyebrow. "May I ask why?" "Because," I said, meeting his gaze, "I want the work to be judged on its own merit. I want it to speak for itself before I do." He studied my face for a long moment, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. "A respectable strategy." We signed the papers. A few days later, a small article appeared in a prestigious science journal, then was picked up by a mainstream tech blog. The headline read, "A quiet revolution at Crestwood University. New saliva-based sensor promises to redefine early disease detection." The article celebrated the elegant simplicity of the device and quoted Dr. Thorne praising the vision and relentless dedication of a senior researcher on his team. My phone buzzed. It was the family chat. Leo had sent a link to the article. "Leo Vance. Whoa, check this out. Some prodigy at Crestwood is making waves. Mom, you think I know them? LOL. Mom, how exciting. So many bright young people in the world. Dad, thumbs up." I held the phone in my hand, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. I typed a reply, then deleted it. I typed another. Alara Vance. Fascinating. That night, I went online and filled out the application to be the student commencement speaker at graduation. I didn't tell a soul. The only person I wanted to share the news with was Gigi, and our conversations were of a different sort now, quieter, held in the sanctuary of my own mind. 2 weeks before the ceremony, Dr. Thorne walked into my new, small office, a glass-walled space with a real desk and a view of the campus green, and placed 2 cups of coffee on my desk. He looked at me, a rare, genuine warmth in his eyes. "Ready for the big day, Ms. Vance? Or should I say, CEO Vance?" I took a sip of the coffee. It was a perfect dark roast, with a hint of cinnamon. He had remembered how I liked it. I smiled, a real smile that reached my eyes. "Yes," I said. "I think I am." They arrived for Leo's graduation ceremony, which was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. Mine was at 10:30 in the morning. The Crestwood Stadium was a vast bowl of buzzing energy. Sunlight streamed down, glinting off brass instruments as the university band warmed up. Banners bearing the Crestwood seal, a mighty oak tree over an open book, fluttered in the gentle May breeze. Backstage, a flurry of activity surrounded me. A student volunteer adjusted my microphone, her hands trembling slightly. Another pinned a small, enameled Crestwood emblem to the lapel of my blazer. I smoothed the dark fabric, took a deep, steadying breath, and looked out through a gap in the curtain at the swelling crowd. This wasn't about revenge. It was about resolution. Leo had posted a countdown on his blog that morning. "The big day is finally here. Can't wait to celebrate with the fam at 2 p.m. My mother and father had both shared it, adding a cascade of celebratory emojis. They had no idea I was even attending the morning ceremony, let alone standing on the stage. I had made sure of it. In the 5th row center section were 3 empty seats with small, printed name cards on them. Vance. They were for Leo's ceremony. My parents had arrived early to get good seats for their son. They were about to get a front row view of their daughter. The low hum of the crowd quieted as the university president approached the podium. On the massive jumbotrons flanking the stage, the Crestwood seal appeared, majestic and proud. "Ladies and gentlemen, faculty, families, and graduates," the president's voice boomed, echoing through the stadium. "It is my distinct honor to introduce this year's honorary student commencement speaker. Her work has already begun to change the world. Please join me in welcoming the founder and CEO of Origin Biosystems, Ms. Alara Vance. A ripple of confusion, then recognition, spread through the crowd. I stepped out from behind the curtain into the blinding sunlight. The applause was immediate and thunderous, a wave of sound that washed over me. From the third row, I saw Maya leap to her feet, whistling and cheering. Near the faculty section, Dr. Thorne stood with his arms crossed, a faint, proud smile on his face. The cameras zoomed in, and my face filled the jumbotrons. And then I saw them. Row 5. My father's hand, which had been mid-clap, froze in the air. My mother's polite smile faltered, her eyes widening in disbelief. Leo leaned forward, his brow furrowed, as if trying to solve a puzzle. He looked at my father and mouthed the words, "Did you know?" My father just shook his head slowly, his gaze fixed on the stage. I walked to the podium, my steps even and sure. The applause subsided into a watchful silence. "I was once told that I was the resilient one," I began, my voice clear and steady, carrying to every corner of the stadium. I was the one who didn't need help. And for a long time, I believed that strength was a kind of invisibility cloak. But strength isn't about not needing help. It's about learning to build your own light when the world turns all the lamps off. I didn't look at my family. I looked at the sea of faces in front of me, young, hopeful, and ready to begin. I told them about Origin. I told them about the science, the late nights, the quiet, world-changing power of a single, validated idea. I told them about the patient whose future had been rewritten. "This journey wasn't mine alone," I said, my voice softening. "It was built on the foundation of a few, crucial people who saw me when I felt invisible." I thanked Dr. Thorne for his mentorship. I thanked Maya for her quiet friendship. And then, my voice thick with emotion, I thanked my grandmother. I am standing here today because a woman named Genevieve Vance once handed me a blank journal and a small envelope of money she couldn't afford to part with. She told me to use it to build a door where there was only a wall. She told me to write down the things no one else would hear. I paused, letting the weight of her memory fill the space. To anyone out there who has ever felt overlooked, whose victories have gone uncelebrated, your time is not coming. It is here. It is now. They may not be clapping for you yet, but trust me, one day they will have no choice but to stand. I looked, just for a second, toward the family section. My father had his head in his hands. My mother was staring at me, her face pale, her expression a complex tapestry of shock and something I couldn't quite name. As I stepped back from the podium, the stadium erupted. It was a sustained, roaring ovation. Later, as I was shaking hands in a reception area, I saw a headline pop up on someone's phone. "Biotech CEO stuns Crestwood at commencement." Family watches in shock. I didn't check my own phone until that evening. There were 43 missed calls and unread messages. The first one was from my mother. It arrived at 9:17 a.m., just as my speech was ending. "Mom, we had no idea. We'd love to have dinner with you tonight. Just us. No pressure." I read the message, a strange sense of calm settling over me. There was no apology, no real acknowledgement. Just an invitation, an attempt to smooth over the chasm that had opened between us. I typed a reply. "Alara Vance, I'm sorry, I already have plans." And I did. That evening, the second floor of Trattoria Valini, a cozy Italian restaurant downtown, was filled with the warm murmur of conversation and the clinking of wine glasses. The reservation was under my name, but here, I was just Alara. This was my team. My family. Maya raised her glass, her eyes sparkling. "A toast," she declared. "To Alara, the quietest force of nature I've ever met." Laughter filled the room. Dr. Thorne lifted his own glass in a rare display of public sentiment. "To the future," he said, his gaze meeting mine across the table. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Leo. "Leo Vance, I get it now. I'm sorry. I should have seen it. You deserved so much more from us." I read it twice. He was the first to apologize. I thought for a moment, then typed back. "Alara Vance, we all see things when we're ready to." I put the phone away. Through the large window, the lights of the city spread out like a galaxy of tiny, earthbound stars. Each light represented a life, a story, a person working and hoping and building something in the dark. I stood for a moment, watching the city breathe, feeling the warmth of the room at my back. I thought of Gigi, of her gnarled hands and her fierce, loving eyes. She would have loved this, I thought. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that she did. Justice, I realized, doesn't always arrive like a thunderstorm, with fury and noise. Sometimes it arrives like the dawn, quietly, bathing the world in a new and honest light. Some stories don't end in forgiveness or revenge. They end in the simple, unshakable truth of becoming yourself on your own terms. And for anyone out there still tending to their own seeds in the dark, know this: growth is inevitable. The sun will find you,